Good evening all, and welcome back to Untold Fears. Tonight, the warmth of Christmas lights and the comfort of family gatherings will not be enough to protect you from what hides just beyond the glow. These are not campfire tales or cozy holiday legends. These are allegedly true Christmas horror stories, whispered by those who swear they survived the darkest nights of the year, when snow muffles every sound and help feels a lifetime away. From quiet homes to crowded city streets, from familiar faces to strangers in the dark, each story will pull back the tinsel and expose the rot beneath the holiday cheer. As you listen, you may find yourself looking twice at your own decorations, your own traditions, and the people you think you know. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Untold Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now let us step into the shadows of the Christmas season, where celebration ends and terror begins. When I was 28 years old, I worked as a real estate agent in a quiet suburb about 40 minutes outside of the city. The job kept me busy, especially during the holidays when people wanted to close deals before the new year or find their dream homes before Christmas morning. I lived alone in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, a neighborhood where everyone knew their neighbors and crime was practically non-existent. My girlfriend Sarah was spending Christmas Eve with her family 3 hours away, and I had planned to drive up Christmas morning to join them. That meant I had the house to myself on December 24th, which honestly did not bother me. I enjoyed the quiet, and I had last-minute gifts to wrap before heading out the next day. The house itself was nothing fancy. I'd purchased it 2 years prior as my first real investment property. It had a small living room with a fireplace, a kitchen that opened into a dining area, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. The backyard was fenced in, and there was a wooden porch that wrapped around the back of the house. I had decorated modestly for Christmas. A 6-foot tree stood in the corner of the living room, covered in white lights and silver ornaments. Beneath it sat a pile of wrapped presents for Sarah's family, my parents, and a few friends. The house smelled like pine from the fresh tree, and I had Christmas music playing softly from my phone as I worked. It was around 11 o'clock at night when I settled onto the couch with rolls of wrapping paper, scissors, and tape spread out on the coffee table. Snow had started falling earlier in the evening, and through the front window, I could see a thin layer of white covering the street. The neighborhood was silent except for the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. Most of my neighbors had already left town to visit family, so the street felt abandoned. I did not mind. There was something peaceful about being the only one awake while the rest of the world slept. I was halfway through wrapping a cookbook for Sarah's mother when I heard it. Footsteps. They were faint but distinct, coming from the back porch. I paused, scissors in hand, and listened. The sound came again. Slow, deliberate steps on the wooden planks outside. My first thought was that it must be an animal. We had raccoons in the area, and they were always getting into trash cans. I set down the scissors and walked toward the kitchen, where the back door was located. The door had a small window at the top, covered by a thin curtain. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out into the darkness. The porch light was off. I could see nothing but shadows and the faint outline of the fence at the edge of the yard. Snow was falling harder now, and the wind had picked up. I stood there for a moment, waiting to see if I would hear the sound again. Nothing. I convinced myself it was just the wind, or maybe a branch from the oak tree scraping against the house. I let the curtain fall back into place and returned to the living room. But then I heard it again. This time it was not footsteps. It was the sound of the doorknob being rattled. Someone was trying to open the back door. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze in the middle of the living room, staring toward the kitchen. The rattling stopped. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table and turned on the flashlight, then walked back to the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I approached the door. I pressed my face close to the window and shined the light outside, moving it across the porch and into the yard. There was no one there. The porch was empty. The snow was undisturbed except for a few footprints leading up to the door and then back toward the stairs. My breath fogged the glass as I stared at those prints. Someone had been standing right outside my door. I quickly checked the lock. It was bolted. I had locked it earlier when I came home from work, just like I always did. I stepped back from the door and tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was a neighbor who needed help. Maybe someone's car had broken down and they were looking for assistance, but it was nearly midnight and no one had knocked or called out. I walked through the rest of the house, checking every window and door to make sure they were locked. The front door was bolted. The side door leading to the garage was locked. All the windows were shut tight. I went upstairs and checked the bedrooms. Nothing. I returned to the living room and sat back down on the couch, but I could not focus on wrapping gifts anymore. I kept staring toward the kitchen, waiting for another sound. My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone watching the house? Did they think I was not home because most of the lights were off? I decided to call the non-emergency police line just to report it. I explained what had happened, and the dispatcher said she would send an officer to do a sweep of the area. I thanked her and hung up. While I waited, I turned on every light in the house. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, even the upstairs bedrooms. I wanted anyone outside to know that I was awake and aware. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, checking the time every few minutes. Then I heard it. Glass breaking. The sound came from the kitchen, sharp and unmistakable. I jumped to my feet and stared in horror as I saw the small window on the back door shattered. A gloved hand reached through the broken glass, fumbling for the lock. I did not think. I ran. I bolted upstairs to my bedroom and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone as I dialed 911. The operator answered immediately. "Someone is breaking into my house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I gave her my address and told her what was happening. She told me to stay on the line and to hide. I could hear her typing and talking to someone else in the background. I pressed my ear to the bedroom door and listened. Footsteps. Multiple sets of footsteps. There was more than one person in my house. I heard voices downstairs, male voices. They were speaking in low tones, but I could not make out what they were saying. I heard the sound of things being moved around, furniture scraping against the floor, the rustling of wrapping paper. They were going through the presents under the tree. I backed away from the door and crouched down beside my bed, phone still pressed to my ear. The operator was telling me that officers were 3 minutes away. 3 minutes felt like an eternity. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone was coming up. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and paused. I held my breath. I could see the shadow of feet blocking the light under my bedroom door. The doorknob turned slowly. It rattled against the lock. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The person on the other side pushed against the door, testing it. Then I heard another voice from downstairs. "Forget it, let us go. Cops are coming." The footsteps retreated. I heard them running down the stairs, then the sound of the back door slamming shut. I stayed frozen in place, too terrified to move. The operator was still on the line, asking if I was okay. I managed to whisper that I thought they were gone. She told me to stay where I was until the police arrived. Moments later, I heard sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through my bedroom window. I heard car doors slamming and voices shouting. I finally unlocked my bedroom door and stumbled downstairs. 2 police officers were standing in my living room. They had entered through the broken back door. One of them asked if I was hurt. I shook my head. I was too shaken to speak. They swept the house and the yard, but the intruders were gone. The officers found the presents scattered across the floor. The television was missing. My laptop was gone from the kitchen counter. They told me there had been a string of break-ins in the area over the past week, targeting homes that looked empty during the holidays. One of the officers went upstairs to check the bedrooms. When he came back down, his face was serious. He told me they had found scratches on my bedroom door frame. The intruders had tried to pry the door open. If the police had not arrived when they did, I do not know what would have happened. They took my statement and dusted for fingerprints. They found none. The gloves had made sure of that. They boarded up the broken window and told me to stay somewhere else for the night. I called Sarah and told her what had happened. She was horrified. I packed a bag and drove to her family's house that night, arriving just before dawn on Christmas morning. I did not sleep. I could not stop thinking about those footsteps, the shadow under my door, the sound of the doorknob turning. The house no longer felt like mine. It felt violated, unsafe. I had the locks changed and installed a security system as soon as I returned. I sold the house 6 months later. I could not stay there. Every creak, every gust of wind, every shadow made me think they had come back. Now, every Christmas Eve, I check every lock in my house 3 times before going to bed. I leave lights on in every room. I keep my phone next to me. And I never, ever stay home alone during the holidays. Some people think I am paranoid, but they were not there that night. They did not hear the footsteps or see the shadow under the door. They do not know what it feels like to realize that the only thing standing between you and a stranger with unknown intentions is a single locked door. Christmas is supposed to be about peace and safety and family. But for me, it will always be a reminder that the people who want to hurt you do not take holidays off. The green tights were the worst part. Not the pointy foam shoes that made my feet sweat. Not the ridiculous hat with the bell on the end that jingled every time I moved my head, but the green tights. I was 19 years old, home from college for winter break, and I had made the monumentally poor decision to take a seasonal job as an elf at the Westfield shopping mall. The pay was decent for what it was, and I needed the money. Student loans were not going to pay themselves, and my parents had made it clear that if I wanted spending money over the holidays, I needed to earn it myself. The job itself was not complicated. I worked as Santa's Village, which was set up in the center of the mall near the food court. It was an elaborate display with fake snow, plastic candy canes taller than me, and a throne where Santa sat for 8 hours a day listening to children recite their wish lists. My responsibilities included managing the line of parents and children, handing out candy canes, helping kids onto Santa's lap, and taking photos with the parents' phones when they asked. It was repetitive and exhausting, but it could have been worse. The Santa I worked with was a man named William. He had been the mall Santa for 8 consecutive years, which apparently made him somewhat of a legend in the seasonal employment world. William was in his early 60s with a real white beard that he grew out every year specifically for the job. He did not need a fake beard or padding. He was naturally round in the belly, rosy in the cheeks, and had a deep, warm laugh that made even the most skeptical children smile. Parents loved him. Kids loved him. Management loved him. He was, by all accounts, the perfect Santa Claus. William and I got along well from the start. During slow periods when the line died down, we would talk. He told me stories about past Christmases, about the funny things kids had asked for over the years, about the time a child had thrown up on his lap after eating too much cotton candy. He had a good sense of humor, and he seemed genuinely kind. He asked me about college, about what I was studying, about my family. After our shifts ended, he sometimes invited me to grab coffee at the shop near the mall entrance. I accepted a few times. It seemed harmless. He reminded me of my own grandfather in some ways. It was December 22nd, a Wednesday evening, and the mall was finally closing. It had been an exhausting day. The line for Santa had been non-stop from the moment we opened until the moment the mall announced over the intercom that it would be closing in 15 minutes. Parents were desperate to get their children's photos taken before Christmas. William and I had barely had time to eat lunch. By the time the last family left and we began cleaning up the Santa's Village area, I was ready to collapse. William suggested we sit in the employee break room for a few minutes before heading home. I agreed. The break room was located in the back corridors of the mall. past the loading docks and storage areas where shoppers never went. It was a small, dingy room with a couple of tables, a microwave, a refrigerator, and a couch that had seen better days. At this hour, the room was empty. Most of the other seasonal workers had already clocked out and gone home. We sat down at one of the tables. I pulled off my elf hat and rubbed my temples. William took off his Santa coat and sighed heavily. He looked tired, older than usual. He asked if I wanted a soda from the vending machine. I said sure. He got up, fed some coins into the machine, and brought back 2 cans. We sat in silence for a moment, sipping our drinks. Then William spoke. "Do you believe people can be forgiven for bad things they have done?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost tentative. I looked at him, surprised by the question. I shrugged and said, "I guess it depends on what they did." He nodded slowly, staring down at the table. Then he said, "I did something bad once, a long time ago, during Christmas." I did not know what to say. I assumed he was about to tell me about some minor mistake, like forgetting to buy his wife a gift or getting into an argument with a family member. I said, "I'm sure it was not that bad." He shook his head. "No," he said. "It was bad." There was a long pause. I felt uncomfortable. I was not sure if I should ask him to elaborate or change the subject. But before I could decide, he continued. "It was 15 years ago," he said. "Christmas Day. I was drunk. I had been drinking all afternoon. My wife and I had gotten into a fight, and I left the house to cool off. I was walking through a parking lot downtown near the old church on 5th Street. There was a homeless man there. He asked me for money." William's hands were shaking. He gripped the soda can tightly. "I told him I did not have any cash," he continued. "But he kept asking. He followed me to my car. He got aggressive, started yelling at me, calling me names. I do not even remember what he said exactly. I just remember being so angry, so drunk and angry. I pushed him. He pushed me back, and then I hit him." I felt my stomach tighten. I did not want to hear the rest of this, but I could not look away. William's eyes were glassy, staring at something far away. "He fell," he said. "He hit his head on the curb. There was so much blood. I panicked. I checked for a pulse, but I could not find one. I did not know what to do. I was drunk. I was scared. So I left. I got in my car and I drove away. I left him there in that parking lot on Christmas Day." I could not breathe. My heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to believe he was joking, that this was some kind of sick test or a story he had heard somewhere. But the look on his face told me he was telling the truth. "The next day," William continued, "I saw it on the news. They found his body. The police said it was an unsolved death. They thought maybe he had fallen and hit his head on his own, or that someone had mugged him. They never found out it was me. I never told anyone, not my wife, not the police, no one. I realized I was gripping the edge of the table. I did not know what to say. William looked at me, and his eyes were filled with something I could not quite identify. Guilt, maybe, or desperation. "I have lived with it every single day since then," he said. "That is why I do this. That is why I am Santa every year. It is my penance. I try to bring joy to kids, to families, to make up for what I took away. I know it does not erase what I did, but it is all I can do." I finally found my voice. "William," I said slowly, "why are you telling me this?" He wiped his eyes and shook his head. "I do not know," he said. "I just needed to tell someone. I'm tired of carrying it alone." I stood up from the table, my legs feeling weak. "I think I need to go," I said. He nodded and did not try to stop me. I grabbed my coat and my bag and walked out of the break room as quickly as I could without running. I sat in my car in the mall parking lot for 20 minutes, hands shaking, trying to process what I had just heard. Was he serious? Was he lying? Was this some kind of confession or a delusion brought on by stress? I did not know, but I could not just ignore it. I pulled out my phone and started searching for news articles from 15 years ago. I typed in keywords, Christmas Day, homeless man, 5th Street, downtown, death, unsolved, and I found it. An article from December 26th, 15 years prior. A homeless man named Robert Collins had been found dead in a parking lot near a church on 5th Street. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Police suspected foul play but had no leads. The case was never solved. I read the article 3 times. The details matched what William had told me. The location, the date, the cause of death. It was real. I felt sick. I did not sleep that night. I could not stop thinking about it. I kept imagining William, drunk and angry, leaving that man to die in a parking lot on Christmas Day. I kept thinking about Robert Collins and whether he had a family, whether anyone had mourned him. I thought about the fact that I had been sitting across from a man who had killed someone and never faced consequences. The next day, I could not go back to work. I called in sick. I spent the entire day agonizing over what to do. If I reported William to the police, would they even believe me? Would they be able to prove anything after 15 years? Would William deny it and say I made it up? But if I did nothing, I would be complicit. I would be letting a man who killed someone walk free. In the end, I decided to call the police anonymously. I used a payphone at a gas station and told them I had information about an unsolved death from 15 years ago. I gave them William's full name, his address, and a summary of what he had confessed to me. The officer on the other end took down the information and said they would look into it. I hung up and walked away. 2 days later, on Christmas Eve, I saw it on the news. William had been arrested. Police had questioned him about the death of Robert Collins, and he had confessed. He told them everything. The article said he seemed almost relieved to finally admit what he had done. He was charged with manslaughter. His family was devastated. The mall released a statement saying they were shocked and saddened. Parents who had brought their children to see Santa were horrified. I quit my job at the mall. I could not go back there. I could not put on that elf costume and pretend everything was normal. My parents asked why I quit, and I told them I just did not like the job. I never told them the real reason. I never told anyone except my roommate at college, and I swore him to secrecy. William eventually pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. The case made headlines for a while, and then people moved on. But I've never forgotten. I still think about that night in the break room, the way his hands shook as he told me what he had done. I think about Robert Collins and the family he left behind. I think about how William had hidden behind a Santa suit for 15 years, trying to atone for a sin that could never be forgiven. Now, every time I see a mall Santa, I wonder what kind of person is really behind that beard. I wonder what secrets they carry, what mistakes they have made, what darkness they hide beneath the red suit and the jolly laugh. Christmas is supposed to be about innocence and magic and goodness. But I learned that sometimes the people we trust to embody that goodness are the ones carrying the heaviest sins. And no amount of ho 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 can wash away the blood on their hands. I am 32 years old, and I work as a graphic designer from home. I have always considered myself tech-savvy. I build websites on the side, I understand internet security, and I am careful about what information I share online. I use strong passwords, two-factor authentication, and I never click on suspicious links. So when what happened to me on December 23rd actually occurred, I felt like an idiot. I felt like everything I thought I knew about staying safe online meant nothing. It started as a normal evening. I was working from my apartment in the city, finishing up a project for a client before the Christmas break. My older sister Sophia had texted me earlier in the day, asking if we could video call to finalize our Christmas dinner plans. She was hosting this year at her house, and we needed to coordinate who was bringing what dishes, what time everyone should arrive, and what we were doing about gifts for the kids. I told her I would call her around 7 o'clock after I finished work. At exactly 7, I opened my laptop and started a video call through a messaging app we always used. Sophia's face appeared on the screen after a few rings. She was sitting in her kitchen, and I could see Christmas decorations in the background. A wreath hung on the wall behind her, and I could hear faint Christmas music playing. She smiled and waved, and we started talking about the menu. She wanted to make ham and mashed potatoes. I offered to bring a salad and dessert. We talked about whether our brother was bringing his new girlfriend and whether our mother needed a ride. The conversation was going smoothly for about 10 minutes. Then something happened. Sophia's face froze on the screen for a second. The image stuttered, and then the video resumed. I figured it was just a bad internet connection. It happens all the time with video calls. But when she started talking again, something felt off. Her tone was slightly different. She used words she normally would not use. She called me Liv instead of Olivia, which she never does. I brushed it off. Maybe she was distracted or tired. Then she asked me a strange question. She said, "Hey, what is your address again? I want to send you a surprise Christmas package." I stared at the screen, confused. Sophia knew my address. We were sisters. She'd been to my apartment dozens of times. I laughed nervously and said, "You know where I live. You have been here like 100 times." She smiled, but the smile looked wrong. It did not reach her eyes. She said, "Oh, I know. I just wanted to confirm because I have been so scatterbrained lately." I felt a small knot form in my stomach. Something was not right. I decided to test her. I asked, "Do you remember what we got Mom for her birthday last month?" There was a pause, a long pause. Then she said, "Of course I do. We got her that necklace." But we did not get our mother a necklace. We got her a gift card to her favorite restaurant. I felt my heart start to race. I kept my face neutral and said, "Right, yeah, the necklace." While still on the video call, I grabbed my phone and sent a text message to Sophia's number. I typed, "Are you on a video call with me right now?" I watched the screen. The woman on the video call did not look down at her phone. She did not react at all. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed with a response from the real Sophia. "What video call? I'm at the grocery store. What are you talking about?" My blood turned to ice. I stared at the woman on my laptop screen. She was still smiling at me, still sitting in what looked like Sophia's kitchen. But it was not Sophia. I did not know who or what it was, but it was not my sister. My hands were shaking. I tried to keep my voice steady. I said, "Hey, can you remind me when we last saw each other in person?" The woman on the screen hesitated. Then she said, "It was last weekend at that coffee shop, remember?" I had not seen Sophia in person for 3 weeks. We had both been too busy with work and holiday preparations. I felt sick. I said, "Right, yeah, I remember." I was stalling, trying to figure out what to do. The woman on the screen leaned closer to the camera. She said, "So can you just confirm your address for me? And also, what is your work schedule like this week? I want to make sure I send the package when you will be home." I realized what was happening. This was a scam. Someone had created a deepfake of my sister. They were using artificial intelligence to mimic her face and voice. They were trying to get personal information from me. But how did they know to target me? How did they have footage of Sophia to create the fake video? My mind was racing. I said, "You know what? I actually have to go. Something just came up at work." The woman's smile faded. She said, "Wait, we are not done talking about Christmas dinner." I said, "I will text you later." And I ended the call. My hands were trembling. I immediately called Sophia's phone. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Sophia, someone just video called me pretending to be you. It looked exactly like you. It sounded exactly like you. They were asking for my address and my work schedule." Sophia was silent for a moment. Then she said, "What? That is insane. How is that even possible?" I explained to her about deepfake technology, about how scammers can use artificial intelligence to create realistic videos of people using photos and videos pulled from social media. I told her they probably scraped her Facebook and Instagram for images and videos of her face. Sophia posted frequently on social media. There were hundreds of photos and videos of her online. I told her to check her accounts and see if anything looked suspicious. She said she would. I hung up with Sophia and immediately started changing all of my passwords. Email, banking, social media, everything. I enabled two-factor authentication on every account that offered it. Then I called the police non-emergency line and explained what had happened. The officer I spoke to sounded skeptical at first, but when I explained the technology behind deepfakes, he took me more seriously. He said I should file a report and that they would look into it. I spent the next hour reviewing my recent online activity. I checked my bank accounts for any suspicious transactions. Nothing. I checked my email for any password reset requests. Nothing. But then I noticed something strange. 3 days earlier, I had received a friend request on social media from someone claiming to be a former coworker. I had accepted it without thinking much about it. I went to that person's profile now and looked more closely. The profile had only been created a week ago. There were no posts, no friends except for me, and the profile photo looked like a stock image. I had been targeted. Someone had created a fake profile, added me as a friend, and then used access to my photos and information to create the deepfake of Sophia. I blocked the profile and reported it to the platform. Then I went through my entire friends list and removed anyone I did not personally know. I made all of my accounts private. I deleted old photos and videos. I felt paranoid, but I did not care. The thought that someone had been watching me, studying me, preparing to scam me, made my skin crawl. 2 days later, on Christmas morning, I received a call from a detective. He said they had traced the video call I received back to an IP address overseas. It was part of a larger scam operation that had been targeting people during the holidays. The scammers would create deep fakes of family members and use them to extract personal information, which they would then use for identity theft or financial fraud. The detective said I was lucky I had caught on when I did. Many people did not realize they were being scammed until it was too late. He told me there had been at least a dozen other victims in the area over the past month. Some had given out their social security numbers. Some had provided bank account information. One woman had wired $5,000 to someone she thought was her daughter, who claimed to be in trouble and needed money urgently. The detective said the scam was sophisticated and that the people behind it were likely part of an international crime ring. He said it would be difficult to catch them, but they were working with federal authorities. I spent Christmas Day with Sophia and the rest of my family, but I could not stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the video call in my mind, the way the fake Sophia had smiled, the way she had asked for my address, the way she had paused when I asked about our mother's birthday. It had all seemed so real. If I had not texted the real Sophia, I might have fallen for it. I might have given out my address, my work schedule, my personal information. I did not want to think about what could have happened after that. Sophia and I came up with a system after that. Anytime we video call now, we text each other a random word first, something completely unrelated to anything. If the person on the video call cannot repeat that word back, we know it is not real. It sounds paranoid, but it works. It gives us peace of mind. I also became much more careful about what I post online. I do not share photos of my apartment or my workplace. I do not check in at locations. I do not post about my daily routine. I learned that every piece of information you put online can be used against you. Every photo, every video, every status update is a potential tool for someone who wants to hurt you. Now, before any video call with family, I verify it is really them. I ask questions only they would know the answers to. I trust nothing at face value. Some people think I am being extreme, but those people were not on that video call. They did not see their sister's face staring back at them, knowing it was not really her. They do not know what it feels like to realize that technology has advanced to the point where you cannot even trust your own eyes anymore. Christmas is supposed to be about connection and family and love, but I learned that the same technology that allows us to stay connected can also be weaponized by people who want to deceive us. During the holidays, when we are vulnerable and trusting and desperate to connect with the people we love, we make the easiest targets of all. The Secret Santa drawing happened on December 1st, right after our Monday morning staff meeting. Someone had put all of our names into a Santa hat, and we each pulled one out. The rule was simple. You had to get a gift for whoever's name you drew, $20 limit, and the gifts would be exchanged at the company Christmas party on December 20th. I worked at a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown, 30 people total, and this was our third year doing Secret Santa. It was supposed to be fun, something to build camaraderie and get everyone into the holiday spirit. I had always enjoyed it in previous years. I pulled a name, glanced at it, folded the paper, and shoved it into my pocket. I would figure out what to get them later. The meeting ended and everyone went back to their desks. I was 26 years old, working as a junior marketing coordinator. My job was demanding but rewarding. I had been with the company for 2 years, and I genuinely liked my coworkers. We had a good team. People were friendly, professional, and respectful. I had never had any problems with anyone. That is why what happened over the next few weeks felt so violating. It came from someone I worked with every day, someone I trusted, someone I thought I knew. The first gift appeared on my desk on December 10th. I arrived at work around 8:30 in the morning, and there it was. A gift box wrapped in silver paper with a red bow. No card, no name. I smiled and opened it. Inside was a beautiful cashmere scarf, deep blue with a subtle pattern. It was expensive, way over the $20 limit. I ran my fingers over the soft fabric and wondered who my Secret Santa was. Someone who either did not care about the budget or wanted to be generous. I draped the scarf over my desk chair and went to make coffee. When I came back, I noticed a small note tucked into the box that I had missed before. It was written in neat handwriting on a plain white card. It said, "You looked cold waiting for the bus yesterday. Hope this helps." I read the note 3 times. "You looked cold waiting for the bus yesterday." I took the bus to work every morning. I stood at the same stop on the corner of 5th and Main at 8 o'clock. But how did my Secret Santa know that? How did they know I looked cold? The only way they would know is if they had seen me there, if they had been watching me. I felt a small prickle of unease, but I pushed it aside. Maybe it was someone who also took the bus and happened to see me. Maybe it was a co-worker who drove past that corner on their way to work. It was not that strange. I folded the note and put it in my desk drawer, then hung the scarf on my coat rack. I tried to focus on work, but the note kept nagging at me. The second gift appeared 2 days later, on December 12th. This time, it was sitting on my desk when I came back from a meeting. A tall cup from the coffee shop down the street, still warm. My favorite drink, caramel macchiato with an extra shot of espresso. I picked up the cup and looked around the office. A few people glanced at me and smiled, but no one said anything. There was another note taped to the cup. Caramel macchiato with extra shot, just how you like it. Thought you could use a pick-me-up. My hands started to shake. I had never told anyone at work what my coffee order was. I usually made coffee in the office kitchen, or I stopped at the coffee shop on my way in and drank it before I got to my desk. How did someone know my exact order? I looked around the office again, trying to figure out who could have done this. My cubicle was in the middle of the floor, surrounded by other cubicles. Anyone could have left the coffee while I was in my meeting. But that was not the point. The point was that someone knew details about my life that I had not shared. I walked to the HR office and knocked on the door. Our HR manager, a woman named Linda, invited me in. I showed her the note and explained about the scarf and the bus stop comment. I told her I was starting to feel uncomfortable. Linda listened carefully and said she would look into it. She asked me who I had drawn for Secret Santa, and I told her. She checked the list and confirmed that the person I had drawn was not the same person who had drawn me. She said she would reach out to my actual Secret Santa and ask if they had been leaving the gifts. I thanked her and went back to my desk. That afternoon, Linda called me back to her office. She said she had spoken to my assigned Secret Santa, a guy from the accounting department named Tom. He said he had not given me anything yet. He was planning to give me a gift card at the Christmas party. Linda looked concerned. She said that meant someone else was leaving the gifts. Someone who was not my Secret Santa. Someone who was watching me. I felt sick. Linda said she would send out an email reminding everyone about the Secret Santa rules and asking people to respect boundaries. She said if anything else happened, I should report it immediately. I agreed and left her office. I could not focus on work for the rest of the day. I kept thinking about the notes. You looked cold waiting for the bus, just how you like it. Someone had been paying very close attention to me, and I had no idea who. The third gift appeared on December 14th. This time I saw it as soon as I walked into the office. It was sitting on my desk, impossible to miss. A framed photograph. When I got closer, I realized what it was. A photo of my apartment building, taken from across the street, angled up toward the third floor. My apartment was on the third floor. I could see my living room window in the photo. The blinds were open, and I could see the outline of my couch and the lamp in the corner. I grabbed the frame and ran to Linda's office. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Linda took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I showed her the photo and the note that came with it. "You have such a beautiful view from your window." Linda's face went pale. She said, "Emily, this is stalking. We need to call the police." She picked up her phone and dialed. While we waited for the police to arrive, Linda pulled up the security footage from the office. We watched the recording from that morning. At 7:45, 15 minutes before I usually arrived, a man walked into the office. He went straight to my desk, placed the frame photo down, and left. Linda paused the video and zoomed in on his face. I recognized him immediately. It was James. He worked in the IT department. I had spoken to him maybe 5 times in the 2 years I had been at the company. He had fixed my computer once when it crashed. He had helped me reset my password another time. That was the extent of our interaction. The police arrived 20 minutes later. I gave them a statement and showed them the gifts and the notes. I explained that James was not my assigned Secret Santa, that he had been watching me outside of work, and that he had somehow obtained a photo of my apartment. The officers took the evidence and said they would speak to James. Linda told me I could go home for the day if I wanted, but I said no. I wanted to be there when they confronted him. The police went to the IT department and asked to speak with James. He came with them willingly, acting confused. They questioned him in one of the conference rooms. I could not hear what was being said, but I could see through the glass walls. James was shaking his head, denying everything. Then one of the officers showed him something, probably the photo or one of the notes. James's face changed. He started crying. He admitted everything. After the police left with James in handcuffs, Linda called me into her office and explained what he had confessed. James had been obsessed with me for over a year. He had learned my routines by watching me. He knew when I took the bus, where I got coffee, where I lived. He had followed me home multiple times and taken photos of my building. He had access to the company's HR files through his IT position, so he knew my address, my phone number, my emergency contacts. He had a journal at his apartment where he documented my daily activities. What time I arrived at work, what I wore, who I talked to, where I went for lunch. The police had found the journal during a search of his apartment. They also found dozens of photos of me that he had taken without my knowledge. I felt like I was going to throw up. This person had been watching me for a year, and I had no idea. I saw him almost every day at work, and I never suspected anything. He was quiet, polite, unremarkable. He blended into the background. That was what made it so terrifying. He had been hiding in plain sight. The company fired James immediately. I filed for a restraining order, which was granted. James was charged with stalking and harassment. His lawyer tried to argue that he had never physically threatened me, that he was just socially awkward and did not understand boundaries. But the journal, the photos, the gifts, they all painted a clear picture of someone who was dangerous, someone who was escalating. The prosecutor said that if I had not reported it when I did, there was no telling what James might have done next. I did not feel safe in my apartment anymore. I knew he had been there. I knew he had stood across the street and taken photos. I knew he had watched me through my window. I moved to a different apartment in January, one with better security. I changed my phone number. I deleted all of my social media accounts. I stopped taking the bus and started driving to work. I transferred to a different location of the company, one where James had never been, where no one knew what had happened. The Christmas party happened without me. I could not bring myself to go. Linda told me later that people were shocked when they found out about James. No one had suspected him. He was quiet, kept to himself, never caused problems. That was the scariest part. The person who wants to hurt you does not always look like a monster. Sometimes they look normal. Sometimes they sit 3 desks away from you and fix your computer and smile politely and then go home and write about you in a journal. I never participated in Secret Santa again. The idea of receiving anonymous gifts makes my skin crawl, even well-meaning ones, because I learned that anonymity can be used as a weapon. It can hide intentions and mask obsession, and during the holidays, when everyone is caught up in the spirit of giving and goodwill, it is easy to miss the signs. It is easy to accept a gift and not question where it came from or why. I wish I had questioned it sooner. I wish I had trusted my instincts when I read that first note. But I did not, and I will carry that with me every Christmas for the rest of my life. I hate driving at night. I always have. Something about the way headlights create shadows, the way the darkness swallows everything beyond the reach of your high beams, it makes me uneasy. But on December 22nd, I did not have a choice. I was driving from Portland, Oregon to Sacramento, California to spend Christmas with my family. It was a 10-hour drive, and I had left work late. By the time I merged onto Interstate 5 heading south, it was already past 9 o'clock at night. The highway was quiet. Most people had already traveled to their holiday destinations earlier in the week. I saw maybe one car every 5 minutes. The radio played Christmas songs, the same ones that had been on repeat since Thanksgiving. I sang along to pass the time, watching the mile markers tick by. My phone was plugged into the charging port, and I had a full tank of gas. Everything was fine. I told myself I would drive until I got tired, then find a motel and sleep for a few hours before continuing in the morning. Around 11:30, I was somewhere in rural southern Oregon. The fog had rolled in thick, reducing visibility to maybe 50 feet. I slowed down and turned off the radio so I could focus on the road. That was when I saw him, a figure standing on the shoulder of the highway, waving both arms over his head. As I got closer, my headlights illuminated him fully. He was wearing a Santa Claus costume, the whole outfit: red suit, black boots, white beard, red hat. But the costume looked wrong, dirty, stained. The beard was crooked, and the hat was tilted to one side. I slowed down as I approached him. My first instinct was to keep driving. Every horror movie I had ever seen told me not to stop for strangers on dark highways. But it was 2 days before Christmas. If this person was stranded, if they needed help, how could I just drive past? What if it was someone's grandfather or father dressed up for a Christmas party whose car had broken down? I would want someone to stop for my family if they were in trouble. I pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of the figure and put my car in park. I left the engine running and checked my mirrors. The man in the Santa costume started walking toward my car. I rolled down my window halfway and called out, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" He approached the passenger side of the car and leaned down to look at me through the window. Up close, I could see his face more clearly. He was probably in his 50s, unshaven under the fake beard, with bloodshot eyes. He smelled like alcohol. The stench was so strong it made me gag. "Car broke down about a mile back," he said. His words were slurred. "Need a ride to the next town, just a few miles up the road." I hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong. His car broke down a mile back, but there was no car visible behind us. He smelled drunk. He was wearing a dirty Santa costume in the middle of nowhere, but I had already stopped. I'd already engaged with him, and part of me still wanted to believe I was doing the right thing. "Get in," I said. "I will take you to the next town." He opened the passenger door and climbed in, bringing the smell of alcohol and sweat with him. I immediately regretted my decision. He settled into the seat, adjusting his Santa hat, and looked over at me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Thanks," he said. "Real nice of you. Not many people stop anymore." I put the car in drive and pulled back onto the highway. I kept my eyes on the road, hands gripping the steering wheel. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. He was staring straight ahead, not saying anything. The silence was suffocating. I tried to make conversation to ease the tension. "So, where were you coming from?" I asked. He did not answer right away. Then he said, "Party. Christmas party. Had a little too much to drink, I guess." "Is your car really broken down?" I asked. He laughed. It was a harsh, unpleasant sound. "Does it matter?" he said. I did not respond. We drove in silence for another minute. Then he spoke again. "You know, you should take the next exit. There is a shortcut. Get you to the town faster." I looked at the GPS on my phone. The next exit was 2 miles ahead, but it led to a rural county road. The GPS said to stay on the highway. "I think I will just stick to the highway," I said. His expression changed. The fake smile disappeared. "I really think you should take that exit," he said. His voice was harder now. I glanced at him and saw his hand move toward his coat pocket. He pulled something out, just enough for me to see the handle of a knife. My heart stopped. He was not asking. He was telling me. "Take the exit," he said again. My mind raced. If I took the exit, I would be on a dark, empty road with no witnesses, no help, no way to escape. If I stayed on the highway, what would he do? Would he stab me while I was driving? Would I crash? I saw a sign ahead. "Gas station, next exit, 1 mile." I made a split-second decision. I pressed down on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, going from 60 to 80 miles per hour in seconds. The man in the Santa costume yelled, "What are you doing? Slow down!" I ignored him. I kept my foot on the gas, weaving slightly to make it harder for him to do anything. The exit sign came into view. I could see the lights of a gas station ahead, glowing like a beacon. I did not signal. I did not slow down. I jerked the wheel to the right at the last possible second and took the exit ramp at 70 miles per hour. The tires squealed. The car fishtailed slightly, but I held on. The man in the Santa costume was thrown against the door. He shouted something, but I could not hear over the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I slammed on the brakes as I entered the gas station parking lot, skidding to a stop in front of the main entrance. I threw the car into park, opened my door, and ran. I ran straight into the gas station screaming for help. There was a young guy behind the counter, maybe 20 years old, wearing a name tag that said Derek. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Call the police," I shouted. "There is a man in my car with a knife." Derek grabbed the phone and dialed 911. I stood by the counter, shaking, watching through the window. The man in the Santa costume had gotten out of my car. He stood there for a moment, looking at the gas station, looking at me through the window. Then he turned and walked away. He did not run. He just walked calmly into the fog and disappeared. The police arrived 10 minutes later. I gave them a description of the man and told them everything that had happened. They searched the area but did not find him. They checked my car and found nothing. No knife, no evidence that he had been there, except for the lingering smell of alcohol. One of the officers told me I was lucky. He said there had been 3 reported highway robberies in the area over the past 2 weeks. A man matching the description I gave had been flagging down drivers, getting into their cars, and robbing them at knife point. In one case, he had forced a woman to drive to an ATM and withdraw cash. In another, he'd stolen a car and left the driver stranded on a rural road. The officers said they had been looking for him but had not been able to catch him. He moved around, never staying in one place. He targeted solo drivers late at night when there were no witnesses. The Santa costume was a tactic. It made him seem harmless, non-threatening. People were more likely to stop for Santa Claus than for a random stranger, especially during the holidays. The police offered to escort me to the county line. I accepted. I did not want to drive alone anymore. One patrol car followed me for the next 40 miles until I crossed into California. Then they turned back, and I was on my own again. I drove straight through the rest of the night. I did not stop for gas. I did not stop for food. I did not stop until I pulled into my parents' driveway in Sacramento at 6 o'clock in the morning on December 23rd. My mother opened the door and hugged me. She said I looked exhausted. I told her the drive had been long, but I did not tell her what had happened. I did not want to ruin Christmas. I did not want her to worry. I went to my old bedroom and slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, it was Christmas Eve. My family was gathered in the living room, decorating the tree, laughing, drinking hot chocolate. Everything was warm and safe and normal, but I could not shake the image of that man in the Santa costume, standing on the side of the highway, waving me down. 2 days later, on December 26th, I saw a news article online. Police had arrested a man in southern Oregon matching the description I'd given. He had been caught trying to rob another driver on Interstate 5. He was wearing the same Santa costume. They found a knife in his possession and identified him as the suspect in multiple highway robberies. I read the article 3 times, feeling a mix of relief and horror. Relief that he had been caught. Horror at what might have happened if I had taken that exit. Now, every time I see roadside Santa decorations, those inflatable figures people put in their yards, those charity Santas ringing bells outside of stores, I think about that night. I think about how easily I could have died because I wanted to be a good person, because I wanted to help someone during the holidays. I learned that kindness can be exploited, that generosity can be weaponized, that the symbols we associate with safety and joy, like Santa Claus, can be twisted into something sinister. And I learned that during Christmas, when we are told to trust and give and open our hearts, we are at our most vulnerable, because not everyone dressed as Santa has good intentions. Sometimes the person asking for help is the one you should fear most. The Help Wanted sign had been sitting in the window of my boutique for almost 2 weeks before anyone responded. It was mid-November, and I desperately needed extra staff for the Christmas shopping rush. I owned a small clothing boutique in a downtown shopping district, the kind of place that sold handmade jewelry, vintage dresses, and locally designed accessories. It was my dream come true, opening that store 3 years ago with my savings and a small business loan. But running it alone during the holidays was impossible. Last year, I had nearly collapsed from exhaustion trying to manage inventory, customers, and the register all by myself. When Ava walked in on November 18th and asked about the position, I felt like my prayers had been answered. She was 23 years old, well-dressed, articulate, and had a resume that listed experience at 2 other retail stores in the area. She spoke confidently about customer service and said she loved fashion and small businesses. She had excellent references listed, 2 managers from her previous jobs who I planned to call. Her availability was perfect. She could work evenings and weekends, exactly when I needed the most help. I hired her on the spot, pending a reference check. I called both references that afternoon. The first number rang 4 times and went to a generic voicemail. I left a message. The second number was answered by a man who said yes, he had managed a store where Ava worked, and yes, she had been a wonderful employee, punctual and trustworthy. That was good enough for me. I called Ava and told her she could start the following Monday. She sounded thrilled. Her first 2 weeks were flawless. She showed up on time, sometimes even early. She was friendly with customers, helped them find what they needed, and rang up sales without any issues. She stayed late to help me reorganize the stockroom and put up Christmas decorations. She suggested we rearrange the front window display to highlight our holiday collection, and it looked amazing. Sales went up, customers complimented her. I felt like I had finally found someone I could trust. By the second week of December, I was comfortable enough to give Ava a key to the store so she could open on mornings when I had appointments or needed to run errands. I also gave her the code to the alarm system and added her as an authorized user on the register. She had earned it. She had proven herself reliable. I even told my mother that I had finally found good help, that this Christmas season was going to be manageable for the first time. Then the money started disappearing. It was small amounts at first. On December 10th, I noticed the register was short by $90 at the end of the day. I recounted the cash 3 times, checked the receipts, ran the sales reports. The numbers did not match. I assumed I had made a mistake, maybe given someone incorrect change. It happened sometimes during busy periods. I did not mention it to Ava. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, $75 was missing. Then 3 days after that, another $100. I started keeping closer track of the register throughout the day, counting the cash drawer during my lunch break and again before closing. The pattern became clear. Money was disappearing during Ava's shifts, specifically during the hours when I was not in the store. I felt sick. I did not want to believe she was stealing from me. I had trusted her. I had given her a key to my business, but the evidence was undeniable. On December 16th, I came in early, before Ava's shift started, and checked the security camera footage. I had installed cameras 2 years ago after a shoplifting incident, but I rarely looked at the recordings. I scrolled through footage from the past week, watching Ava work. At first, everything looked normal. She helped customers, folded clothes, organized shelves. Then I saw it. During a lull when no customers were in the store, Ava walked to the register, opened the cash drawer, and took out several bills. She folded them quickly and slipped them into her pocket. She did it so casually, so smoothly, like she had done it 100 times before. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I kept watching. I found 3 more instances over the past week where she had pocketed cash. But then I saw something worse, much worse. I watched her take customer receipts from the trash, the ones with full credit card numbers printed on them. She photographed them with her phone. I zoomed in on the footage and saw her writing down information in a small notebook. She was stealing credit card numbers. I paused the video and sat there in shock. This was not just petty theft. This was identity fraud. This was a serious crime that could destroy my business. I grabbed my phone and called the references Ava had provided, the ones I had called when I hired her. The first number, the one that had gone to voicemail before, was disconnected. The second number, the one where a man had answered and vouched for Ava, rang once and went to a generic voicemail. I realized with horror that the man I had spoken to before had probably been part of the scam. Someone pretending to be a reference. I searched for Ava's name online, trying to find social media profiles or any information about her. Nothing. The name she had given me did not exist on any platform. I pulled out her job application and looked at the social security number she had written down. I called my accountant and asked him to verify it. He called me back 20 minutes later and said the number belonged to someone else. A woman in her 60s who lived in another state. Ava had stolen someone's identity to get this job. I called the police immediately. I explained everything: the missing cash, the credit card numbers, the fake identity, the false references. They told me to act normal, not to confront Ava, and to wait for them to investigate. They arrived an hour later, 2 detectives in plain clothes. I showed them the security footage. They took copies of everything, including Ava's application, and the notebook I had found in the stockroom where she had been writing down customer information. The detectives told me they needed to run her photo and fingerprints through their system. They dusted the register and the notebook for prints. One of the detectives recognized her from the security footage. He said her real name was not Ava. She was part of an identity theft ring that had been operating across 3 states. They targeted small businesses during the holiday season when owners were desperate for help and less likely to do thorough background checks. They used stolen identities to get hired, stole cash and credit card information, and then disappeared before anyone noticed. The detective said they had been looking for her for months. She had done this at a clothing store in Seattle, a bookstore in Portland, and a gift shop in Eugene. Every time, the pattern was the same: get hired, gain trust, steal information, and vanish. The detective asked when Ava was scheduled to work next. I told him she had a shift the following morning. He said they would be ready. The next day, December 17th, I opened the store as usual. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. 2 undercover officers were stationed nearby watching. Ava arrived at 10 o'clock right on time, smiling and cheerful as always. She greeted me, hung up her coat, and started organizing the shelves. I felt like I was going to be sick. How could she act so normal, knowing what she had done? At 10:30, the detectives walked in. They identified themselves and asked to speak with Ava. Her face went pale. She tried to run, but one of the officers blocked the door. They arrested her right there in the middle of my store. They read her rights and took her away in handcuffs. I stood there, frozen, watching it happen. Customers who had just walked in turned around and left. It was surreal. After Ava was taken away, the detectives stayed and talked to me. They said they had found evidence linking her to dozens of victims. She had stolen over $50,000 in cash and fraudulent credit card charges from businesses like mine over the past year. They also found my customer database on her phone. She had copied names, addresses, email addresses, and credit card information from over 300 of my customers. The detective said I needed to notify everyone immediately. I spent the rest of the day calling customers, sending emails, explaining what had happened. I had to tell people that their personal information had been stolen because I had hired someone without doing a proper background check. Some customers were understanding, others were furious. Several threatened to sue. My business reputation was destroyed overnight. I contacted my insurance company, but they said I was not covered for this kind of loss. I had to pay for credit monitoring services for every affected customer out of my own pocket. The financial damage was devastating, but the emotional damage was worse. I had trusted Ava. I had given her access to everything. I had been so desperate for help during the busiest season of the year that I had ignored warning signs, the references that were too easy to reach, the social security number I did not verify, the lack of any online presence. I had wanted to believe she was legitimate because I needed her to be. Ava was eventually charged with identity theft, fraud, and theft. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But that did not undo the damage she had caused. Several of my customers never came back. My sales dropped. I had to take out another loan just to keep the business afloat. I hired a new employee the following year, but this time I paid for a professional background check, verified every reference in person, and required fingerprinting. I never hired anyone again without doing my due diligence. Now, every Christmas season, I think about Ava. I think about how easily she fooled me, how she smiled and laughed and pretended to care about my business while she was robbing me blind. I learned that desperation makes you vulnerable, that the holiday rush, the pressure to succeed, the need for help, all of it can cloud your judgment. I learned that trusting someone too quickly, especially during the time of year when you are overwhelmed and exhausted, can cost you everything. And I learned that not everyone who offers to help during the holidays has good intentions. Sometimes they are just waiting for you to let your guard down so they can take everything you have worked for. Moving into a new house right before the holidays was probably not the smartest decision I've ever made, but I did not have a choice. The lease on my apartment had ended, and the landlord was selling the building. I had been searching for a rental for months, and everything in my price range was either too far from my daughter's school or in terrible condition. Then I found the house on Birch Lane, 3 bedrooms, a fenced backyard, quiet neighborhood full of families. It was perfect. We moved in on December 1st, and I was determined to make it feel like home before Christmas. I am a single mother. My daughter Emma was 7 years old at the time, and Christmas was her favorite holiday. She had been upset about leaving the apartment where she had lived since she was 3, so I wanted to make this Christmas extra special. I decided to go all out with decorations, not just inside the house, but outside too. I wanted our new house to look magical, to show Emma that this was a fresh start, a place where we could make new memories. I spent the entire first weekend of December hanging lights. I strung white icicle lights along the roof line, wrapped the porch railings in multicolored bulbs, and set up an inflatable Santa and reindeer in the front yard. I put a wreath on the door and lights around every window. By the time I finished on Sunday evening, the house looked like something out of a holiday movie. The neighbors came over to compliment me. Emma was thrilled. I felt proud. This was going to be a good Christmas. On Monday, December 5th, I came home from work just as the sun was setting. I pulled into the driveway and immediately noticed something was wrong. The Christmas lights were not on. I had set them on a timer to turn on at 5 o'clock every evening, and it was already 5:30. I assumed the timer had malfunctioned or the plug had come loose. I walked around to the side of the house where the outdoor outlet was located. The lights were unplugged. The cord was lying on the ground. I picked it up and examined it. The plug looked fine. Nothing was damaged. The wind must have knocked it loose, I thought. I plugged it back in and the lights came on immediately. I went inside, made dinner for Emma, and did not think about it again. The next evening, the same thing happened. I came home and the lights were off. I checked the outlet and once again, the plug had been pulled out. This time, I was annoyed. I plugged it back in and made sure it was secure. I pushed it all the way into the outlet and checked the timer box to make sure it was working properly. Everything seemed fine. On the third night, December 7th, it happened again. The lights were unplugged, but this time the timer box had been opened. Someone had tampered with it. The cover was hanging loose and the settings had been changed. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was not the wind. This was deliberate. Someone was coming to my house and unplugging the lights. I looked around the yard. It was getting dark and the street was quiet. Most of my neighbors were still at work. I felt exposed, vulnerable. I plugged the lights back in, reset the timer, and went inside. I locked all the doors and checked all the windows. I did not tell Emma what was happening. I did not want to scare her. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about who would do something like this. Was it a neighbor who did not like the lights? Was it kids playing a prank? Or was it something worse? I decided to set up my phone to record the outlet overnight. I positioned it on the windowsill inside the house, pointing out at the side yard where the outlet was located. I set it to record and went to bed. The next morning, I checked the footage. I fast-forwarded through the video until I saw a movement. At 2:15 in the morning, a figure appeared on the screen. A man, wearing dark clothing and a hoodie. He walked up to the outlet, unplugged the lights, and then did something that made my blood run cold. He tried the back door handle. He pulled on it, testing to see if it was locked. Then he walked around to the side of the house and peered into the windows. He stood there for almost a minute, looking inside before walking away and disappearing into the darkness. I watched the video 3 times, my hands shaking. This was not a prank. This was not about the lights. Someone was using the darkness created by unplugging the lights to check out my house, to see if it was an easy target, to plan something. I saved the video and immediately called the police. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them the footage. They watched it carefully, rewinding it several times. One of the officers asked if I recognized the man. I said no. He asked if I had noticed anyone suspicious in the neighborhood. I said no. He told me they would increase patrols in the area and suggested I keep all doors and windows locked. He also said I should consider installing a security system. I thanked them, but I did not feel reassured. That night, I left the Christmas lights unplugged intentionally. If this person was coming back to check if the house was vulnerable, I wanted to be ready. I called my brother and asked him to come stay with us. He arrived around 9 o'clock. I explained what had been happening. He was furious. He wanted to wait outside and confront the person if they showed up, but I told him no. I said we should call the police the moment we saw anyone. We waited. Emma was asleep upstairs, unaware of what was happening. My brother and I sat in the dark living room, watching the side yard through the window. My phone was in my hand, ready to dial 911. The hours dragged by. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight, nothing. I started to think maybe the person had seen the police earlier and been scared off. Then, at 1:50 in the morning, we saw him. The same figure in dark clothing walking up the driveway. He went straight to the outlet, checked that the lights were still unplugged, and then walked to the back door. This time, he did not just try the handle. He pulled out a tool, a crowbar or something similar, and started prying at the door frame. I dialed 911 immediately, whispering into the phone. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, stay quiet, and that officers were on the way. My brother wanted to go outside and confront him, but I grabbed his arm and shook my head. We watched through the window as the man worked on the door. I could hear the wood splintering. He was going to get in. Then I heard Emma. She had woken up and was crying in her bedroom. The sound carried through the house. The man outside stopped. He looked up toward the second floor where her bedroom window was. For a moment, everything was silent. Then I heard sirens in the distance. The man heard them too. He dropped the crowbar and ran. I ran upstairs to Emma and locked us in her bedroom. My brother stayed downstairs, watching to make sure the man did not come back. The police arrived less than 2 minutes later. They searched the yard and the surrounding streets, and they found him 3 blocks away, hiding behind a dumpster. They arrested him on the spot. The officers came back to the house and took my statement. They examined the back door, which was damaged but still intact. One of the officers told me the man had confessed. His name was Ryan, and he had been targeting houses in the neighborhood for weeks. He looked for homes with elaborate Christmas light displays because, in his mind, expensive decorations meant expensive belongings inside. He would unplug the lights over multiple nights to scout the houses in darkness, checking for security systems, testing locks, watching routines. Then he would break in when he thought no one was home. The officer said I was the 4th house Ryan had targeted, but I was the first one who had caught him before he could complete the break-in. The other 3 families had been robbed while they were at work or out shopping. Ryan had stolen televisions, laptops, jewelry, and cash. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of items. The police had been looking for him for 2 weeks. Ryan was charged with attempted burglary, criminal trespassing, and possession of burglary tools. The district attorney also charged him for the 3 completed burglaries. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. But that did not erase what had happened. It did not make me feel safe in my own home. I had the back door replaced and installed a full security system with cameras and motion sensors. I took down most of the exterior Christmas lights. I kept a small strand around the front door and a wreath, but I did not do the elaborate display again. Emma asked why, and I told her the lights were too much work. I did not tell her the truth. I did not tell her that someone had used our decorations, our joy, our celebration, as a way to mark us as victims. We stayed in that house for 2 more years, but I never felt completely safe there. Every sound at night made me jump. Every shadow in the yard made me check the cameras. I moved to a different neighborhood eventually, one with better street lighting and a neighborhood watch program. Now, I keep my Christmas decorations minimal. A small tree inside, a wreath on the door, maybe some candles in the windows. Nothing flashy, nothing that draws attention. People ask why I do not decorate more, why I do not go all out like I used to. I tell them I prefer simplicity now. But the truth is, I learned that showing off during the holidays can make you a target. I learned that the joy and light we put on display can be used against us by people who see opportunity instead of celebration. And I learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do during Christmas is let the world know you have something worth taking. Downloading a dating app was not my idea. It was my friend Marcus who convinced me. We were sitting at a bar 2 weeks after my breakup with Rachel, and I was complaining about how lonely the holidays felt when you were single. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed me his dating app profile, and said I needed to stop moping and put myself out there. He said the holidays were actually a great time to meet people because everyone was feeling sentimental and looking for connection. I was 28 years old, recently single after a 3-year relationship, and the thought of spending Christmas alone was depressing. So I downloaded the app. I spent an hour creating my profile. I chose photos that made me look approachable but not desperate. I wrote a bio that mentioned I liked hiking, cooking, and classic movies. I listed my job as a project manager at a tech company. I tried to be honest but also interesting. By the time I finished, it was late and I was exhausted. I set the app aside and went to bed. The next morning, December 8th, I had 15 matches. I scrolled through them during my lunch break at work. Most of the conversations were generic. How are you? What do you do? What are you looking for? But one match stood out. Her name was Jessica. Her profile said she was 26, worked in graphic design, loved dogs, and enjoyed trying new restaurants. Her photos showed a pretty woman with long dark hair and a warm smile. She sent me a message first. Hey William, your profile made me laugh. Anyone who lists The Godfather as their favorite movie is worth talking to. I smiled and wrote back. We talked for the rest of the day. The conversation flowed easily. She was funny, smart, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about our jobs, our families, our favorite holiday traditions. She said she was also dreading spending Christmas alone because her family lived across the country. I felt an instant connection. By the end of the week, we were texting constantly. Good morning messages, funny memes, updates about our days. It felt natural, comfortable, like we had known each other for months instead of days. On December 15th, Jessica suggested we meet in person. She said there was a coffee shop downtown that she loved, a cozy place with good pastries and strong espresso. She suggested we meet there on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. I agreed immediately. I was excited. I had not felt this way about anyone since Rachel. I spent the days leading up to the date thinking about what I would wear, what I would say, how I would make a good impression. On the morning of December 23rd, I woke up early and spent too much time choosing an outfit. I settled on jeans, a button-down shirt, and a jacket. Casual, but put together. I drove downtown and arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. I sat at a table near the window and ordered a black coffee. My hands were shaking slightly from nerves. I checked my phone. Jessica had texted me 10 minutes earlier saying she was on her way. At exactly 2 o'clock, she walked in. She looked just like her photos. Long dark hair, wearing a green sweater and black jeans. She smiled when she saw me and walked over. We hugged awkwardly, the way people do when they have only known each other online. She ordered a latte, and we sat down across from each other. The conversation started well. We talked about the traffic, the weather, the coffee shop. She complimented the decorations, the Christmas tree in the corner, the garland strung above the counter. But as we talked, I started to notice things. Small things that did not quite add up. She mentioned that she had driven past my apartment building on her way here, said it looked nice. I had never told her where I lived. I had been careful not to share my exact address. I only told her I lived on the north side of the city, I asked her how she knew where I lived. She laughed and said I must have mentioned it in one of our texts. I did not remember mentioning it, but I let it slide. Maybe I had. Maybe I was being paranoid. We kept talking. She asked about my job, and I told her about the project I was managing. Then she said something that made me freeze. That must be exhausting, especially with the commute. The building on 4th and Main is pretty far from your apartment, right? I'd never told her where my office was. I stared at her, my mind racing. How do you know where I work? I asked. She hesitated for just a second. Then she smiled and said, You mentioned it. I have a good memory for details. But I had not mentioned it. I was sure of that. I had told her I worked in tech, but I had never given her the name of my company or the address. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I tried to keep my voice casual. What else do you remember about me? I asked. She launched into details. She knew I drove a silver Honda Civic. She knew I went to the gym on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings before work. She knew I usually stopped at the same coffee shop near my apartment every morning around 7:30. She knew my sister's name was Amanda and that she lived in Seattle. I had not told her any of those things. Not in our texts, not in our conversations, not on my dating profile. My heart started pounding. Jessica, I said slowly, how do you know all of this? Her smile faded slightly. She looked annoyed, like I was ruining the moment. I told you, she said. You mentioned it. You're probably just forgetting. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and then quickly turned it face down, but I'd seen the notification. It was a photo of me, leaving my apartment building. This morning, I was wearing the same jacket I had on right now. I felt sick. Let me see your phone, I said. She looked at me and her expression changed. The warmth was gone. Her eyes were cold. Why would I show you my phone? She asked. That is an invasion of privacy. I stood up from the table. Who are you? I asked. Why do you have photos of me? She stood up too. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Sit down, she said. You're making a scene. People in the coffee shop were starting to look at us. I pulled my arm away. Do not touch me, I said. She stepped closer, her voice low and angry. I have spent weeks getting to know you, William. Weeks. I have invested so much time in this. You cannot just walk away. You have been following me, I said. You have been stalking me. She laughed, but it was not a normal laugh. It was sharp and bitter. I was not stalking you, she said. I was making sure you were who you said you were. I was making sure you were safe. I was protecting myself. You should be grateful. I backed away from her. Stay away from me, I said. I turned and walked toward the door. She followed me, shouting, You do not get to just leave. We had plans. We were supposed to spend Christmas together. I know everything about you. I know where you live. I know where your sister lives. I know your schedule. You cannot just ignore me. I pushed through the door and walked quickly toward my car. She was still following me, her voice getting louder. People on the street were staring. I reached my car and fumbled with my keys. She grabbed the door handle before I could get in. Please, she said, and her voice had changed again. Now she sounded desperate, pleading. I did all of this for you. I just wanted to meet you. I just wanted to make sure we were perfect for each other. I finally got the door open and got inside. I locked the doors. She stood outside, hitting the window with her hand. I started the car and drove away, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I drove back to the coffee shop and went inside. I asked the barista to call the police. I told them what had happened. I showed them the text from Jessica, the messages, the dating profile. The police arrived 15 minutes later. I gave them a full statement. I described Jessica, told them about the photo on her phone, about the things she knew that I had never told her. One of the officers asked for her phone number and profile name from the dating app. He said they would investigate. 2 days later, on Christmas Day, a detective called me. He said they had identified the woman. Her real name was Jessica, but she had a history. She had been arrested twice before for stalking. Once in another city, once in another state. She would create fake dating profiles, match with men, and then obsess over them. She would follow them, learn their routines, take photos, collect information. In one case, she had broken into a man's apartment and waited for him to come home. In another, she had shown up at a man's workplace repeatedly until he filed a restraining order. The detectives said they had obtained a warrant for her phone and found hundreds of photos of me. Photos of me leaving my apartment, going to the gym, at the grocery store, at work. She had been following me for over a month, since before she even matched with me on the dating app. She had seen me at a coffee shop in November and become fixated. She created the dating profile specifically to make contact with me, to manufacture a connection that felt natural and organic. I was granted a restraining order. Jessica was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. The judge ordered her to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. She was eventually sentenced to 18 months in jail and mandatory counseling, but the damage was done. I deleted every dating app on my phone. I changed my routines, my gym, my coffee shop. I moved to a different apartment. I became paranoid about who was watching me, who was following me, who might be taking photos. My friends told me not to let one bad experience ruin dating for me, but they did not understand. They had not seen the look in her eyes when she grabbed my arm. They had not heard her voice when she said she knew where my sister lived. They had not seen the hundreds of photos she had taken of me without my knowledge. Now, I do not date during the holidays. I do not download apps or go to bars or accept invitations from people I do not know, because I learned that loneliness can make you vulnerable, that the holidays, with all their emphasis on connection and togetherness, can make you desperate enough to ignore warning signs. I learned that the person who seems perfect online might be someone who has been watching you for weeks, studying you, waiting for the right moment to make their move. And I learned that swiping right during the loneliest time of year can connect you with someone who has been watching you all along. Someone who will not let go, even when you run. Someone who mistakes obsession for love and surveillance for devotion. The holidays are supposed to be about connection, but sometimes the person reaching out to you in the darkness is not looking for love. They are looking for control, and once they have it, they will never let you go.